Well, given we've covered the Ridley Scott classic, why not get into the James Cameron-made sequel, in other words, the only other one that matters? I'm one of those people who still prefers Aliens, not that Alien isn't a masterpiece, and that's got nothing to do with the genres, I just like it slightly better. The 1986 sequel has lots of intriguing facts to uncover, and as always, to keep things somewhat new, I won't be wasting your time with stuff like Cameron almost not making it, and the fact that it won 7 Academy Awards. No, instead I'll attempt to bring you something you haven't heard, but I probably won't succeed. I mean, it's Aliens, who hasn't researched everything there is to know about aliens, not to be confused with real aliens, so here are 20 things you hopefully didn't know about Aliens. Not all the fans liked it. While I can definitely understand preferring Alien, I think we can all agree it's a pretty damn good sequel. The more popular something gets, the more people are going to point out it's not as good, but even in the beginning, it wasn't exactly considered perfection. Die-hard fans were upset about it for a number of reasons, likely a switch from horror to a more action-oriented approach, but it seems like a lot of the complaints were down to the xenomorph itself. It was looked at as being less menacing. Instead of one primary antagonist, we see them being picked off one by one. But as Cameron himself put it, given the Marines had overwhelming firepower, it makes sense they'd use their strength in numbers to their advantage. Really, I don't know what they expected, they had to up the ante somehow, and as for a sequel with only one xenomorph, we know how that turned out. Facehuggers were inspired by flying piranhas. The casual fan may know James Cameron for Aliens, the Terminator, and sadly, Avatar, but many forget where it all began. That being Piranha 2, which may be the least good of all the Piranha movies, and something James Cameron doesn't really feel that he directed, despite being credited. But hey, it did have flying piranhas. Okay, it's not that appealing, but at least the mechanics weren't solely wasted on this mediocre film. In the scene when we see the facehuggers moving about the test tubes, the mechanics used to make the piranhas fly were reused here, and it was done to great effect. Some call these the scariest of all the xenomorph breeds, and even though Piranha 2 may not be the finest of all directorial debuts, at least it wasn't a complete waste. Oddly enough, the film may have also led to the creation of Terminator, a story that involves flying to Rome, becoming sick, having a feverish nightmare, but a story for another day. It was Carrie Henn's only role. After being discovered by casting agents in her school cafeteria, Carrie Hen has been known for only playing the role of Newt, and that isn't exactly unknown. What's less talked about is what she did after, and her reasoning for not pursuing an acting career mainly came down to her not wanting to be separated from her family, leading her to never act again. There were also claims of other students being jealous of her success, something I have no issue believing, but a child actor having only one iconic role isn't that uncommon, so it isn't exactly a bad deal. She is now a teacher in California and makes occasional sci-fi convention appearances, along with a couple of documentaries about the film, and given how a lot of other child actors turned out, I wouldn't complain. Nearly a mass walkout on set. You know, making an iconic household name movie can never be simple, and one way or another there has to be a power struggle on who's really directing. This happened with Cameron and assistant director Derek Cracknell, leading Derek to commonly disobey him and inevitably being fired. Obviously it can't just end there, he'd have to urge the rest of the crew to walk out with him, and after hours of negotiation later, they agreed to stick with Cameron if he would be more respectful of their breaks. I believe tea also played a big factor in the discussion, but in the end, he told the crew that he was motivated with the knowledge that one day he could drive out of Pinewood and never come back, while you sorry bastards would be stuck there forever. That's not the exact quote, but you get the idea. The knife scene was kept secret from Bill Paxton. It's amazing how many great scenes got that way, not just through great acting, but through authenticity. I've said that many times before, and the knife scene is yet another example. The point of this was to show that Hudson's macho personality was just a front, and part of the reason this works so well is because Bill Paxton was never told. While Henriksen suggested the idea to put his hand above his, while repeatedly jabbing the table between his fingers, only the rest of the crew was told this would happen. The result is as genuine gets, solidifying his character as one of the most memorable. That and a few famous lines, along with an epic standoff, but I feel it all began here. Sigourney Weaver didn't want to do a sequel. It's not unreasonable that Sigourney Weaver would be hesitant to reprise her role, despite it making her famous, as sequels tend to not have the same effect and possibly just ruin stuff. This was the case with Aliens until Cameron came on board, and after reading the script and seeing that it actually developed the character, which is just insane, we know how things turned out. The thing that interested her most was the motherly bond between her and Newt, but honestly, I feel Avatar 2 truly understood how to portray parenting in movies. I'm just kidding, the quality comparison is beyond insane. No special effects used on the Queen. You know, AVP is what it is, it's not as bad as Requiem, but I think it kind of sucked, and the climax at the end with the CGI alien Queen can't remotely compete with the climax of Aliens. It's kind of amazing. I don't think I need to explain how we got to this point. It's one of the most iconic scenes and/or lines ever, but it's also a glorified puppet. There was little to no computer effects to be found. They used bin bags created by the crew and hoisted it on a crane, with the action primarily fitting between full-scale and 3-foot-tall models. Definitely wouldn't have been an easy shoot trying to maintain the scale of this, and despite my common jabs at Cameron's recent work, there's no denying the feat here. AVP may have had one fantastic scene, but the rest is far from essential viewing. Hicks was almost played by James Remire. Corporal Hicks, played famously by Michael Biehn, I think, was, you're not gonna see this coming, not Cameron's first choice. James Remire, known for playing Ajax in The Warriors, was originally the guy, but a few incidents led to his removal. See, the actors playing the Marines were given military training, and upon allegedly discharging a live shotgun round into a wall and being found with possession of drugs, well, you can figure out the rest. Technically, he is still in the movie, there be it his back, as a lot of scenes were shot already and had to be reshot, but the way I see it, it all worked out. I mean, Michael was in Cameron's other big movie to date, I forgot the name, so why the hell not? The making of the knife trick. The knife trick may be iconic, as I've explained, it's definitely authentic, but as you may guess, it's not actually done for real. I mean, it is real, but if you're gonna do something without someone's consent, you're not gonna do it at that speed. It's the classic speed up the footage technique, which isn't exactly hard to figure out, but what's funny about this is how they failed to hide it. If you look at Sergeant Appin, who is sitting next to Hudson, you'll see his head moving way faster than it should be. Granted, you're not given much time to see this, maybe they're counting on the excitement to divert your attention, but when you notice it, you can't unnotice it. They probably should have thought of that, so there you go. A famous scene that I recently improved the quality of with the previous fact is now not as good. Originally, Amanda Ripley was alive. In the film, Ripley is informed after being rescued that her daughter Amanda died when she was floating in hyperspace for 57 years. A sad moment indeed, but it's not the way it almost went down. Originally, she'd still be alive, though quite old, and despise her mother for abandoning her and breaking her promise. It'd be kind of like Interstellar, only way less reasonable, as it's obviously not her fault, so I'm definitely glad they didn't do this. It's never a good idea to make us hate characters for stupid reasons. The scene is fine the way it is, but it would be interesting to see. Luckily, she wasn't forgotten, becoming the main character in Alien Isolation, a fantastic game IGN fans may have missed out on. Think of that as a bonus fact in case you accidentally listened to that review, and if so, you can like the video down below, and consider subscribing if you've learned something new so far. It shares a Batman universe, in theory. Okay, it's not really the same universe. If it was, that'd be kind of weird, and also a pretty good thumbnail, but it does kind of come close. When Cameron filmed the hive sequence in the abandoned power station called Acton Lane in northwest London, a lot of the set was left abandoned with part of the hive still being there, meaning when Burton's team came on the film Batman, mainly the famous scene when the Joker falls into a vat of acid, it was, like I said, still present. You know, a real famous scene with stuff in it from a real famous movie. I know it's stupid, but it's gotta intrigue somebody. A deleted scene with Burke. Okay, on one hand, I really wish this was kept in, but Again, there is reasoning. Burke is literally the definition of the person who gets a deserving death. Horror, sci-fi, whatever you want to call it. His look, personality, and even outfit lead to no conclusion but that. Obviously, he betrays them, don't need to get into how, but the cutaway death was a bit of a letdown. Originally, similar to a notable deleted scene from Alien, Ripley would come across Burke, now cocooned, stating he can feel it moving around inside him and begs for help. She would then leave him with a hand grenade and move on with Burke tearfully apologizing. Aside from the fact that I don't buy Burke legitimately being sorry, the reason this was cut comes down to logic. After filming, Cameron realized at that point he would still have the facehugger attached, so logically it made no sense. Even though I'd love to see this, you have to give Cameron credit for putting logic first. Alien movies of today don't deserve such credit. The Marines personalize their own body armor. Another thing the Alien movies of today don't have is realism, creativity, or anything fun. Example of this movie not being that way is how the actors playing the Marines were told by Cameron to personalize their own body armor. The most notable example is Bill Paxton having the name Louise on his armor, a reference to his real-life wife, but less obvious is actress Cynthia Dale Scott, who played Corporal Dietrich, a Marine with a relatively short lifespan, who has the words Blue Angel written on the back of her helmet. An obvious reference to the film with the same name, at least I'm calling it that, which starred, get this, Marilyn Dietrich. Other examples exist, and have fun finding them. It should be a lot of fun. There were only 6 hypersleep chambers for 12 characters. Aliens may have avoided the issue of having to cast children to hide the scale, but that doesn't mean no trickery was used. Budgets were still an issue, as you'd expect, and with the sequence when they awake from hypersleep, it became a problem. They could only afford 6 chambers, but the scene required 12, so they used a nifty trick to get around it, and if you look for a moment, you might be able to guess. Are you ready? Mirrors. With the use of mirrors and impressive shooting, they did it in such a way that you could not tell that the other 6 were merely a reflection. I've got no complaints, it looks fine, so well done. It's referenced in Mad About You. Here's something I don't think anybody else talks about, and that's because nobody cares. The similarities between Aliens and the 90s sitcom Mad About You are non-existent, aside from the actor Paul Reiser. Again, assuming you know nothing about this show, I will point out it did come out after Aliens, and at one point includes an unexpected clever reference. In the episode The Painter, which for whatever reason takes place after the season 1 finale, I don't know, when Paul and Helen ask Mark why he chose to leave his wife to explore the world, he asks Paul if he's ever seen the movie Alien, in which he replies, only the first one. There is so many things this could mean. It could be because he's in the second one, so he couldn't actually see it. Maybe it's because he played a dick, therefore he didn't want to see it. Or perhaps it shares the same universe. Wait a minute. That makes no sense, who dies? Well, the main thing is you likely didn't know this, thus making the video not a complete waste. And that's a good thing, because it took me about an hour of scrolling through sitcom episodes to find this line, as Wikipedia didn't feel the need to mention this subplot. Creating the power ladder was a challenge. The famous power ladder, that was originally going to have 4 legs until The Empire Strikes Back became a thing, was a challenge to say the least. It was a full-scale prop with stuntman John Leese concealed behind Sigourney Weaver, and due to its weight had to be either suspended from wires or mounted on a counterbalance crane for filming. A miniature scale was built for some shots, including wide shots for the fight with the Queen, and the scene when the suit is ejected into space, in which the camera was hung vertically, and the suit was dropped into a safety net painted to resemble space. Originally, Cameron wanted to use stop motion for these wide shots, but the budget wouldn't allow that, and in the end, I don't think it matters. I could continue to stress how perfect this looks, but I feel it'd be a waste of time. Why it's not called Alien 2. The reason this movie's given the unique title of Aliens may not be for the reason you thought. I always assumed it had something to do with more aliens, as it kind of made sense, but it's actually a result of how Cameron pitched it to 20th Century Fox. While they expected a more detailed outline, bigger budget, stuff like that, he instead entered the pitch with basically nothing, aside from the word alien written on the whiteboard, and a $sign next to it. Keep in mind, this was the more profitable movie, despite which one you may like better, and the strategy got the movie greenlit on the spot, with the $sign becoming the S at the end of Aliens. So, there you go. Sigourney Weaver's mother features in the film. Yes, Sigourney Weaver's real-life mother does make an actual appearance in the film, and when you think about it, it's not that hard to figure out where. Back to the scene with her supposedly deceased daughter. If you thought there was somewhat of a resemblance, that's because there is. The woman in the picture is of course Weaver's real-life mother, Elizabeth Inglis, cameoing as her dead elderly daughter. What could be simpler? Honestly, it works out perfectly. She is supposed to be old, and given it's her mother, how could she say no? The definition of game over. I don't think I need to tell you that game over, man, game over was improvised, as a lot of famous lines tend to be. But for Bill Paxton and co-star Lance Henriksen, it really is game over as they both meet their demise by the same three iconic sci-fi villains. Obviously, his character Hudson meets his end in Aliens during the epic standoff, but he also portrays Jerry Lambert in Predator 2, dying to the Predator on the subway train, and is one of the punks to be killed in the intro of Terminator. As for Henriksen, he also meets his demise in Terminator in the police station, and reappears in AVP, too stupid to realize that the Predator would have let him live. Okay, it's more of a sacrifice, and I guess technically his death in Aliens isn't really a death, as he's a machine, and Alien 3 does see him being temporarily turned back on, but it's close enough. It's the reason we have Doom. Ending things off with an actual important fact this time, Aliens is basically the reason we have Doom. It's not that it inspired it, it's the reason it exists. Initially, they were signed on to create a video game adaptation of Aliens, but they desired to have creative freedom, so the idea was scrapped in favor of a new title. That title is of course Doom, and despite not being Aliens, it does have a lot of aesthetic similarities. In 1994, Doom was modded into an Aliens game called Aliens TC, which I guess is what Doom could have been if history had been different. But the way I see it, Doom is for the most part better than most video game adaptations of movies, so I say it worked out. And there you have it, 20 things you didn't know about the movie that basically invented sci-fi horror. Let me know what you guys thought down below, still hoping Alien Romulus could be decent. And if I made any mistakes, let me know how I could justify not watching the movie. Because obviously, I've never watched the movie. And again, if you've learned anything new, please do like the video, and if you really enjoyed, consider subscribing, it helps me a great deal. I'm the Analyst, and remember kids, mirrors can be very handy, especially if the budget needs it. So, you've made it to the end. That's an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, I guess check out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like analysis videos, such as this one. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.